welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Dead Extinct, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Anacleto Montero was, without a doubt, the most famous dandy in his neighborhood, and not just his neighborhood, but the surrounding ones too. He had rivals, sure, and plenty of jealous men who tried to outshine him. But the truth, like the sun, always finds a way to break through the clouds. In the end, everyone saw him for who he really was: dazzling, divine, or if you prefer, divinely dazzling. I'll write this story in a simple, plain, everyday style. Nothing fancy or twisted. None of those complicated tales that unlucky writers use to waste your time and test your patience. No, sir. I don't tell wild or impossible stories. I only tell what I see, what my readers can see too, or maybe already have seen. I watch, I listen, and I write. So, I won't describe Anacleto with dreamy eyes or a brooding Byronic look. He didn't have any of that poetic sadness. The only thing he had from Byron was a broken piece of a French prose translation, which he read and reread, hoping to pull some poetic line from it, something he could whisper to the woman of his dreams. And that woman, by the way, was the prettiest girl in the neighborhood. The story takes place between the Imperatrice Square and the English Cemetery, about 25 years ago. And the young man in question was Anacleto Montero. At the time, he was around 23 or 24 years old. He had just started growing a bit of beard and mustache, had dark skin, black eyes like polished jet, and thick, long brown hair. He curled it with a comb and lard, and every afternoon he placed his best white hat on top of it. Anacleto loved white hats and shiny boots. At that time, some dandies wore varnished boots with red tops. Anacleto thought this was the greatest invention of the century. Anacleto Montero loved the way his red socks looked. He thought they were charming, so charming, in fact, that he never left the house without pulling up his pants just a little, so that the ladies wouldn't miss the bright red flash of his rooster red socks. His pants were slim but stylish, his jacket tight and neat, and his gloves were either cinnamon or gray, always matching his tie, which was also either cinnamon or gray. Give him a cane, and you'd see him exactly as he was 25 years ago, the most famous flirt in the neighborhood. Now, when I say he was the best, I don't mean the best dressed or the most polite. No, what made him stand out was his boldness. It was truly Napoleonic. Anacleto didn't impress with clothes or manners. He wasn't the kind of guy who turned heads just by walking into a room. But when it came to flirting, he was a genius. He flirted the way birds sing, naturally, effortlessly. It wasn't just a habit, it was who he was, deep down. It was his nature, his calling, the way his mind worked. Could you blame a mango tree for producing mangoes? That's how it was with Anacleto. Flirting was in his blood. This little dandy will end up in my house one day with broken ribs, his uncle once said to a female relative. But if he thinks I'm calling a doctor, has very much mistaken. I'll wrap him in a yard and a half of cloth, that's all. Come on, uncle, the woman said quietly. He's just being a young man. A young man? No, A troublemaker, that's what he is. He doesn't respect anything or anyone. All he does is flirt. Everything he earns, every penny, goes to that look at him. To perfume himself, to dress up, and off he goes again. If only he weren't the son of my dear sister. May God rest her soul. Mr. Bento Fagundes, the uncle, tried to calm himself down by sniffing 2 ounces of snuff. Let him be. One day he'll get married, and that'll fix him. Married? What kind of marriage are you talking about? How can someone so wild and crazy settle down? He flirts with girl number 4, then girl number 5, and so on. Well, one of them 5 will catch him, sure enough. And I bet it'll be the worst one. Those are just silly things, the uncle replied. He'll grow out of it. He wasn't going to spend his whole life on it. That much we can be sure of. Oh yes, he will. He'll keep at it. Look, the barber thinks so too. Forget the barber. Want me to tell you what I think? I believe sooner or later, he's going to fall for someone. He already has. I heard something like that at Mass last Sunday. What did you hear? Just things. Come on, tell me. No, I won't. Time will show. Maybe we'll even see a wedding sooner than you think. Really? Mrs. Leonarda gave a little nod. Mr. Bento Fagundes spent a few moments staring at the walls. Then, suddenly angry, he burst out. Well, too bad. He's not in any position to get married. Unless, of course, she brings money with her. And as he said this, he rubbed his thumb against his index finger. Mrs. Donna Leonarda responded with a sad smile, her lips drooping, shaking her head slowly from side to side. Poor girl, said Mr. Bento Fagundes. Listen, if he thinks he can bring his wife here to live with me, is very much mistaken. I'm 54 years old, not about to start raising another family. Maybe he thinks I've got endless riches. Riches, maybe not, cousin, but you've got some savings. Savings? The ones in the drawers. At this point, Mr. Bento Fagundes started to cool down and change the subject. Mrs. Donna Leonarda adjusted her shawl and got ready to leave. Bento Fagundes da Purificação had been a pharmacist on Rua da Saúde since before 1830 in 1852. The year this story takes place, he had already been in the business for 23 years. Everyone believed he had some money saved up, even though no one could say for sure they had ever seen it. There were also 2 slaves in his house, bought from the Valongo market, back when they were newly arrived, and still cheap. Mr. Bento Fagundes lived a life as dull and constant as a drizzle. He rarely left the pharmacy. On Sundays, a neighbor would come by to play backgammon with him. He was really good at the game, not because he was lucky, but because he never lost his temper, no matter how the dice fell. His friend, on the other hand, was quick to get angry and would throw fits every time luck turned against him. Bento Fagundes' luck held out where it mattered most. His pharmacy didn't fall into chaos like the one in Tolentino's sonnet. His business partner didn't throw the account books into the air. He simply spat out his anger, spilled snuff, and sneezed all over his ears, chin, and necktie, before finally finding his nose. Sometimes he'd argue with the pharmacist and stay mad until the next Sunday. But backgammon always made them friends again, like cures like. On other days, Bento Fagundes sold medicines, mixed poultices, rolled pills with care, and gave them the perfect shape. In the mornings, freshly washed and dressed in his yellow cotton robe, he'd sit on a chair outside the shop, reading the Giornal do Commercio. The baker next door lent him the paper, and Bento never missed a thing. He read everything, from reports of debates in Congress to theater at 7, though he never went to shows or left the house. He read personal ads with the same calm. And in the last few minutes, he'd watch the harbor's activity. Once he'd caught up on the day's news, he'd go back to work, focused on the duties of his trade. This routine changed twice a year. Once was during the Feast of the Holy Spirit, when Bento Fagundes would go see the street stalls with the 3 relatives he still kept in touch with. The other time was during the Corpus Christi procession. Except for those 2 events, he almost never went into town. He was as regular as a clock, moved with care, and wore a gloomy look that matched his Chopa dark and somber place. Of course, a man with such deep-rooted habits could barely stand the life his nephew lived. Anacleto Montero wasn't just lively how worked. He had a job at the war arsenal. And only after work or on holidays would he head out to the streets of Saúde and the nearby neighborhoods. That he went out for a walk now and then didn't bother his uncle. But always in red boots, that was the scandal. And that's why the uncle would get angry, scold, and explode. Bento Fagundes didn't have to take Adriano in, give him a room, a bed, or feed him every day. But he did it anyway. Why? Because of his heart. Dear reader, yes. Bento Fagundes' heart was still purer than the medicines he sold. Bento had 2 nephews. One was Anacleto, the son of his beloved, late sister. The other was Adriano Fagundes, the son of a brother Bento had never liked, not even when he was alive. For Anacleto, Bento felt love because of his dear sister's memory. For Adriano, he loved the young man for who he was. He loved them both equally, maybe even a little more than Anacleto, if he was honest. Adriano had qualities that matched Bento's own personality better. First of all, he didn't wear red boots, white hats, gloves, or any of those silly things young men wore to show off. He was serious, maybe too serious, even though he was only 25 years old. He didn't go out much. He didn't go to the theater, didn't smoke cigars, didn't waste money. In fact, he had been using snuff since he turned 20. Even though Bento had invited Adriano many times to live with him, Adriano always refused. He lived in his own house, on Rua do Proposito. Bento suspected that Adriano was saving money, and that only made him like him more. The 2 cousins didn't really like each other very much. But they still saw each other often, sometimes at their uncle's house, sometimes at Adriano's. Adriano couldn't stand Anacleto's flashy lifestyle, and Anacleto thought Adriano was boring and too serious. Both were right, in a way, because people always see things through their own eyes. That's just how humans are. Still, even though there was a big gap between them, they stayed in touch. They kept the friendship from their childhood going. Bento was happy to see them together like that. When Bento got angry at Anacleto, especially about his plans to get married, and said he wouldn't let him back in the house, those were just empty words. It was the kind of anger someone feels when they're hurt, but still care. And when Adriano thought Bento was being cold or distant, that was just a mask. Underneath, Bento cared deeply. As we've said, these two young men were the only people Bento truly loved. And the only real pain he could feel was the thought of them becoming enemies. Bento Fagundes didn't ask for much from life. As long as his nephews Adriano and Anacleto were healthy, working, and happy, he felt satisfied. His sister-in-law, Donna Leonarda, had been his only other living relative, but she passed away before him. In his final years, it was just the two young men, his pride and joy. Now, here is something important to know. Around the time Donna Leonarda shared half a secret with the local pharmacist, there was a lot of truth behind it. At that moment, Anacleto was juggling about 10 or 12 romantic interests, but one of them was starting to get serious. The girl in question lived in Praia da Gamboa and had a pair of dark eyes that could make any man lose his head. She wasn't just pretty, she knew how to play the game. The neighbors said she could outmatch even Anacleto when it came to playing hard to get. That must have been true, because plenty of young men wore out their shoe soles walking around that neighborhood, all for the chance to impress her. None of them gave up easily. If she didn't say yes, she also never said numero. Her name was Carlota, and she was nearly 19. She didn't have much money, but that didn't matter. Her charm, looks, and confidence were more than enough for her admirers. The other girls in the neighborhood couldn't stand her. They envied how she seemed to control the attention of every eligible young man. Most of them barely noticed anyone else. And those few who did show interest in others, they were careful, smart enough to keep chasing Carlota while quietly starting other flings on the side. When Anacleto Montero finally decided to pay attention to Carlota, he had a plan. He wanted to beat the competition, win her heart, and then break things off just like he always did. He imagined returning all her letters, keeping only 2, and giving back her braid of hair, secretly holding on to a few strands. Anacleto Montero got dressed up one Sunday afternoon, putting on his finest clothes, slicking back his hair with pomade, and making sure he smelled just right. He looked sharp, wearing the whitest hat he owned, and stepped out toward Gamboa. You'd think he was a general preparing his troops for battle. This was serious business. Earlier that week, in a barber shop filled with talk and laughter, he had bragged to some friends that he could win the heart of any girl he wanted. Now, he had to prove it. That first day was just about getting a feel for things. He walked by her window and gave her a long, soft look, then a more direct one. And finally, a mysterious glance meant to intrigue her. 20 steps past her house, he stopped, looked out toward the sea, pulled out his handkerchief, touched it to his lips, and then waved it gently like a farewell. It was a dramatic move, carefully planned. Carlota saw everything. She bent down, pretending to play with one of her curls. She knew how to use them. They were part of her charm, her own secret weapon. The next day, Anacleto came back, this time a little closer to her house. He passed by her window 2 or 3 times, smiling, frowning, and even winking. She smiled too, but pretended not to notice, hiding her reaction behind a graceful and subtle gesture. 4 days passed like this, full of quiet looks and shy moves. Anacleto felt ready. It was time to take action. The signs were all there. She waited for him at the window every day, watched his every step, and gave him a soft, secret smile that lingered on her lips. The fortress was close to falling, he decided to send his first love letter. It was always the same one, a classic, Madam. From the very first moment my eyes had the fortune, and so on. 2 full pages of sweet, predictable words that somehow always worked. He folded the letter, sealed it, and tucked it into his pocket like a secret weapon. Later that day he walked by her house again. Night had fallen, and he made his way back. Sticking close to the wall and the gate, he passed her the letter with a cleverness only matched by the cleverness with which he took it. Carlota read it a few minutes later. She read it all. But she didn't write back right away. Anacleto knew how to play the game. For 2 full days after their last encounter, he didn't write a word or even glance toward her window. It was a trick he used now and then, a way to keep things interesting. And it worked. The next day, as he walked past her house, he noticed she wasn't there. No Carlota at the window. The boys called her the goddess of Gamboa, and now she was gone. It was the first time anyone had ignored him like that. He was used to turning heads, to women smiling, to eyes following him. But not this time. He felt something stir inside, pride maybe, or curiosity. The same thing happened the day after. Not a glimpse of her. Now he was truly puzzled. Come on, he thought. What is this? Just some silly girl. But then, another thought came to him. Maybe she's sick. That had to be it. Of course. And if that was the case, how could he know for sure? Should he ask someone? He didn't. He waited another full day. And he was right to wait. On the 3rd day, as he walked by, there she was. He saw her from far away and shouted, "There she is!" Carlota had seen him too, but pretended to be watching the sea. Anacleto got closer. She looked straight at him. Their eyes met. Sparks flew. Just as he passed her gate, he whispered, his voice trembling, his heart pounding. "Ungrateful." She answered without blinking. "At evening prayer." That was all. But for Anacleto, it was everything. He wasn't surprised or hurt. In fact, he felt proud. She had finally responded. The battle was over. She had given in. Later that day, just after the evening prayers, Anacleto returned. He walked slowly, close to the wall, trying to look elegant and shy at the same time. Carlota dropped a piece of paper. He dropped his handkerchief and bent down to pick it up. When he stood up, she was gone. The letter was nothing special, really. Just a cliché she wrote that she felt the same way he did. But she also asked him if he didn't really mean to love her, to leave her alone with her tears and sadness. Tears. That was new. He swallowed her words like sweet candy. No woman had ever written to him like that before. He thought her heart must be burning like a volcano. From that moment on, letters flew back and forth. They met for walks, waved handkerchiefs at each other, and paused at her door, pretending it was all just coincidence. Love was in the air. And Anacleto, for the first time, felt like a true romantic hero. Anacleto Montero reached for her hand before they even reached the door. It was easy, he didn't hesitate, and she didn't pull away. The very next day, he came by again. They stood in silence for a moment, not saying a word. Then they spoke, but not about anything important. They talked about the moon and how hot it was. That was just the beginning. It's true what they say, love often starts with talk about the moon. It wasn't long before they began saying out loud what they had already written to each other in letters. Promises of forever, words of longing, confessions of unstoppable passion. But they never mentioned marriage. She didn't bring it up because of her modesty, and he avoided it out of caution. And so, the first 2 weeks passed. "Tell me the truth," Carlota finally said one day. "Do you really like me?" Anacoleto looked shocked. "Good heavens! Why would you even ask me that?" "I don't know. You seem changeable." "Changeable? Me?" "Yes, you. Someone warned me about you." "Oh, and who was that?" "A friend you don't know." "Carlota, you know my heart beats only for you." "No, I think you're the one who doesn't care at all." "Don't shake your head like that. I can prove how I feel." "Prove it then. Show me one thing. I could show you 20. For one, I still haven't gotten a kiss from you. Doesn't that mean anything? Or are you just playing with my time?" Carlota made a face. "What's wrong?" Anacleto asked, suddenly worried. "Nothing. Just a little pain." "You get these often?" "No, only yesterday." "Maybe it's the start of something serious. Maybe it's death." "Don't say that." The pain went away, but the kiss never came. Anacleto had been hoping for that kiss since the 6th day of their conversations. Carlota, meanwhile, kept pushing it further and further back, like a promise that would never come true. That night, Anacleto left feeling a bit hurt and disappointed. It was the start of something real, something deeper than he had felt before. Anacleto walked down the beach, not noticing a shadow that had been watching him from a distance of 30 or 40 steps. That shadow stayed there for about half an hour longer. Anacleto didn't see it. He kept walking toward home, upset and sad. He smoked 10 or 12 cigarettes trying to distract himself. He read 2 or 3 pages of Carlos Magno, but nothing helped. Finally, he went to bed and only fell asleep very late. The image of Carlota appeared everywhere in the smoke of his cigarettes, in the pages of the book, even under his sheets. The next morning, when he arrived at the pharmacy, he thought he saw her between 2 bottles of ipecac. It was becoming an obsession. The following day came. "No! I must stop this before it gets worse," he told himself. Saying it was easy. Doing it was harder. Still, Anacleto managed to stay away from Gamboa that afternoon. But the night was cruel, and the next day unbearable. So, by the next afternoon, while the sun was still far from setting, Anacleto was already walking along the beach again. Through these constant back and forths, getting angry, calming down, fighting and forgiving, he wasted his time and slowly lost his freedom. True love had taken hold of him. Other women were left to other suitors, who were more than happy to see Anacleto Montero step aside, even if just for a while. Before going on, it's important to say that no one had actually told Carlota what she claimed to have heard. It was just a trick lovers sometimes play, a harmless lie. And Anacleto, being a man, believed it completely. Men in such moments really are quite pitiful. From the moment he realized he truly loved her, Anacleto began to think seriously about marriage. His situation wasn't rich or glamorous, but Carlota had never asked for much, and his heart no longer had the freedom to think clearly. Besides, he held on to the hope of his uncle's syrup business. He also believed that Bento Fagundes had some savings hidden away. Anacleto stood by the window, his heart heavy with longing. Love, Carlota's beauty, their shared poverty, these were reasons strong enough to ask for her hand in marriage. That night he finally did. Carlota listened with a flutter in her chest, but her reply was not what he had hoped for. She didn't say yes. She didn't say numero instead. She asked for time. "Why won't you answer me now?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "I want to," she said. "Then say yes." "I need to talk to my mother first." "Your mother won't stand in our way. She wants your happiness. I believe she won't oppose us. But I don't want to promise you something I can't deliver." "So you don't love me?" "That's not fair." Anacleto bit the edge of his handkerchief, a nervous habit. "You don't love me," he whispered. "I do," she said firmly. "No. If you loved me, you'd say yes." He turned and walked away. "Anacleto," she called, but no words came. She stayed by the window, watching until he returned. And he did return, not long after. "Swear you love me," he said when he came back. "I swear." "I can go more calmly now. But tell me, when will I have your answer?" "In a week. Maybe sooner. Goodbye." This time, as he walked away, someone waited in the shadows just like one of those nights before. Anacleto didn't notice at first. But when he looked up, the figure stepped forward. They stood face to face. It was a dramatic moment, the kind you see on stage. The figure was Adriano. You might think this story's like others you've read, boring, predictable. But this one is different. There's a tragic edge to it. A sharp, dark tone. A careful reader might even sense a kind of moral murder, a shadow of fate from long ago. It's not quite that, but it could be. Adriano didn't pull out a knife. Anacleto didn't reach for a sword, he didn't even own one. And Anacleto, he didn't suspect a thing. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I'm just out for some fresh air." "You're right. It's a warm night." The two men walked side by side, talking about all sorts of unrelated things, until they reached Adriano's door. 5 minutes later, Anacleto was ready to leave. "Where are you headed?" Adriano asked. "Home. It's already 9. "Can I ask you for a few more minutes?" Adriano said, his tone suddenly serious. "Of course." "Then come in." And so they did. Anacleto walked in feeling puzzled, the way the French might say curious, but in a way that meant trouble. His cousin Adriano's tone, the way he acted, everything felt strange and secretive. It made Anacleto even more eager to find out what was going on. Adriano didn't keep him waiting long or let him guess too much. As soon as they were inside, Adriano lit a candle, asked Anacleto to sit down, and began speaking. "Do you like that girl?" Adriano asked. Anacleto gave a small jump. "What girl?" he said after a short pause. "Carlota." "Carlota from Praia da Gamboa?" "Yes." "Who told you that?" "Never mind who told me. Just answer. Do you like her?" "I think so. But really like her?" "Now that's a strange question." "It's not strange at all," Adriano said calmly. "You're known for flirting with all sorts of girls. I don't blame you. A lot of young men do the same. But I want to know if it's serious for you, or just another game." Anacleto thought for a moment. "He'd like to know what you'd do either way." "That's easy. If it's just a game, he'll ask you to stop playing with a poor girl who's done nothing to hurt you." Anacleto became serious. "And if I do like her, really like her, then he'll tell you the same thing. I also like her, and since we both want her, we'll have to find a way to settle this." Anacleto hit the floor with his cane and stood up suddenly, almost as if he would throw something. Adriano, still calm and seated, waited for his cousin's reply. Anacleto paced back and forth, not knowing what to say, angry enough to throw Adriano out the window. The silence lasted a long time. At last, Anacleto broke it. He stopped pacing. "You won't tell me how we'll settle this?" he asked. "There are several ways." "Let's hear them," said Anacleto, sitting down again. "The first is this. You give up your interest. That's the easiest and simplest way." Anacleto only smiled. "What's the second?" "The second is I give up." "That's better. But that's impossible. He'll never do it." "Oh, so it's me who must give up and leave you in peace?" Adriano leaned back in his chair and gave a calm smile. "Let's be honest," he said. "There's a third way. She picks one of us." "That's ridiculous," Anacleto snapped. "Exactly," Adriano replied. "It is ridiculous. And since the first two options are either ridiculous or impossible, I am offering you the most practical one. Walk away. You've had plenty of girlfriends before without getting serious. Just make this one more." Anacleto frowned. "And what about you? You've never even dated anyone." Adriano shrugged. "That's true. But I like her. I really like her. And I want to marry her." Anacleto paused. He hadn't thought of that. It was only now that he asked the most obvious question. "But are you sure she loves you?" "No," Adriano said simply. That was all it took. Anacleto jumped to his feet, muttered a couple of angry curses, and stormed toward the door. "Wait," Adriano called after him. "Let's finish this." "Finish what?" Anacleto shot back. "Do you want me to be your enemy now?" Anacleto shrugged again. "Do you want to fight?" Adriano said, his voice rising. "If that's what it takes," Anacleto said. "Fighting with a fop like you?" Adriano sneered. "You're a fool," Anacleto spat. "And you're rude." "Get out, you idiot." "I'm leaving," Anacleto said. "But not because of your yelling, understand?" "Bravo," Adriano called. "Rude," Anacleto shouted back. And with that, Anacleto walked out. From the window, Adriano shouted one last insult, which Anacleto answered with another of his own. That was the end of it. Once alone, Adriano tried to calm himself. He took a pinch of snuff, muttered to himself a bit, and sat down to think. Of all the things Anacleto had said, the one that bothered him most was being called a fop. That stung. He walked to the mirror and studied himself. Maybe Anacleto was right about one thing: his necktie was tied a little too tightly. Perhaps a simpler style would suit him better. And instead of buying ready-made clothes, he could have them tailored. That would look better. But he refused to give up his white hat. The white hat, he said to himself, is the elegance of fashion. Then he thought of Carlota. Her dark eyes. The way she looked at him with such coldness whenever he stared too long. His heart pounded. It was a mix of love, anger, frustration, and the need to win her over. That night, Adriano slept restlessly, caught between sweet dreams and terrible nightmares. One of those nightmares was so vivid it left him breathless when he woke. Adriano dreamed that his cousin was poking his eyes out with the tip of his cane, right after slapping him across the face with a pair of boots. It happened on a drizzly day, and the whole scene felt like something straight out of Caligula's most dramatic days. Watching it all, Carlota laughed out loud, enjoying every second. Luckily, the shout of a street vendor pulled Adriano out of this nightmare. It was 7 in the morning. He didn't waste a minute. That very day, Adriano decided it was time to upgrade his look. Love, after all, asks for sacrifices. He opened his wallet and ordered a new pair of trousers, something less ridiculous than what he wore. He got a more stylish jacket, a better hat, and said goodbye to his old shoes worth 2,500 rei. When the new clothes arrived, Adriano got dressed fast and headed straight to Praia da Gamboa. He hadn't been there since the last time he saw Anacleto. Meanwhile, his cousin hadn't been idle either. He wasn't scared of Adriano Fagundes, not really. But he thought, why wait? He could beat Adriano's plans by moving faster and getting engaged as soon as possible. Even though he didn't fear his cousin's competition, there were moments when Adriano's words echoed in his mind like a warning. And since he wasn't sure where Carlota's heart truly lay, he sometimes wondered what kind of fight this would turn into. Seeing him gloomy and distracted, the pharmacist remembered something Donna Leonarda had said. He cared a lot for his nephew and felt the urge to ask what was going on, to find out what had changed. But he held back. He didn't dare. Later, he talked to Donna Leonarda about it, and she quickly said, "Didn't I tell you? It's nothing. Just love." The boy's got a crush. A crush? On who? Bento Fagundes asked. Well, I don't know. Or maybe I just won't say. It's probably someone around Gamboa. That was all Bento could get out of her. He stayed upset. Anacleto Montero wasn't acting like himself anymore. Bento worried the boy might chase after the wrong girl, and he started thinking he should step in if things got worse, and if it was even worth it. "What's wrong with you, kid?" he finally asked. "You've been so down lately." Anacleto Montero stood there, eyes fixed on the floor, too nervous to look his uncle in the face. "I don't feel well," he muttered. "I've been constipated." Half the reason for his discomfort, the reader already knows. The other half, I'll now explain. Anacleto had been pushing for marriage, but Carlota kept turning him down. The truth was, she enjoyed being chased. She wanted to keep Anacleto close, to make him suffer a little, to feel the sting of rejection. And why did she do that? Because she had offered herself to other men before many times and none of them ever came back to claim her. She had been in love since she was 15 and was tired of waiting for someone to finally take her seriously. Now, she decided to play hard to get, sure that men always want what they can't have. Carlota was clever, like a female Prince Metternich. Anacleto, frustrated by her refusal, made a huge mistake. He started to believe there was a rival. When Carlota denied it, he shot back, almost in anger. I know there is. I almost got into a fight because of you not long ago. Because of me? She asked, surprised. Yes, he said. A nosy fool me own cousin, unfortunately waited for me one night, and then came looking for a fight. Really? He was furious. We almost came to blows. He cried. He raged. He begged. But I ignored him and walked away. I'm better than him in every way. Oh, come on. Do you want to know what he asked me? What? He wanted me to give up your hand and let him marry you instead. What an idiot. Don't you agree? Of course. Then swear to me it's not because of him. I swear. I feel better now. But when are you going to talk to your mother? Soon. Today or tomorrow. Talk to her today. I can do that. After a pause, Carlota said, But I don't even remember seeing him. What does he look like? A total creep, Anacleto replied. And with the tenderness that the moment brought to his heart, Anacleto described his cousin's appearance in detail, someone Carlota now remembered very clearly. Carlota wasn't physically attracted to Adriano. Not at first, at least. But the idea of being deeply loved madly, even by someone like him, stirred something warm inside her. Women, after all, are often moved more by emotion than by looks. And Anacleto Montero had made mistake after mistake without realizing it. Not only had he told Carlota about Adriano's feelings, but he had exaggerated them, painting a picture of a man completely overwhelmed by love. To hear that a young man was crying over her, that he was wasting away because of her, was the kind of story that stuck in a woman's mind. Carlota started thinking about Adriano, wondering if his love, even if less polished than Anacleto's, wasn't more real. She had read many novels, and liked the kind of love that wasn't ordinary, the kind that broke the rules. Still, Adriano's image kept clashing with those romantic ideas. When she thought about how he dressed his messy hair, his careless look, she felt a little embarrassed. But then again, she asked herself if Anacleto's neatness wasn't actually a bit silly. His ties, though not wrinkled like Adriano's, were too flashy. She didn't even know Adriano's name yet, but already Anacleto's name didn't sound quite right to her. These thoughts filled Carlota's mind just as Adriano's tailor finished his work. So, the very next day after Anacleto told her about Adriano's love, she saw him walk by cleaner, better dressed, more presentable. She shivered when she saw him. As he passed her window and looked at her, she didn't turn away or frown. Adriano kept walking, but he looked back twice, and she was still there, watching. Not only watching, she was fascinated. The thought that this man was crying for her, suffering for love of her, made him seem better than he was. They both felt happy after that moment. This was the turning point of the story. Take a breath, dear reader, and get ready, because strange things are about to happen. Chapter 6. Carlota is now pulled in two directions. Adriano finally confessed everything in a letter. He told her how he felt, how he had loved her from afar, how he couldn't stop thinking about her. Carlota read his words carefully. But now, she faced a problem. She realized the two men who loved her were cousins and each knew about the other's feelings. That made it hard for her to reply. She feared what might happen if she wrote back. Adriano decided to write to her, changing his handwriting a little and keeping the tone as cool as possible. He was happy with the first reply, and quickly sent another letter. She answered again, and from that moment on they began to exchange letters often. Anacleto started to suspect something was going on. First, he noticed how Adriano had changed his style of dress. He saw him at the beach more than once. And Carlota, for her part, seemed distracted sometimes. He saw her less and less, and she sent him fewer letters. Could it be that this dandy is trying something? He thought. He wanted to get revenge but couldn't think of the right plan. He tried to imagine the worst punishment he could give, but nothing came to mind. Nothing seemed serious enough to match his anger. To be honest, dear reader, if you feel any sympathy for this poor lover, I must confess the truth. Anacleto was afraid. If there was any real danger, he would gladly give up every Carlota in the world without a second thought. In a moment of anger, he might shout at Adriano or even raise his fist. He might even try to confront him. But fear would always win. He was scared of his cousin. Coward, he muttered to himself. His buttons, which had no loyalty to Adriano and no stake in the matter, stayed silent and still. Anacleto chose to play it safe. It was the only choice. He decided to protect what he had and tried, in his own way, to win Carlota's heart completely. But she was not ready to give in. They kept meeting at the beach, often by chance. Neither gained an advantage. Adriano had managed to speak to her face, but Anacleto didn't realize it at first. It took him a full week to notice his rival had made real progress. One day he passed by her house. He saw a figure at the door. He looked closer. It was Adriano. Good heavens, Carlota cried. That young man knows me. I know, Adriano replied calmly. He loves you. Oh, but I don't worry, he said. I'll make sure he learns his place. Anacleto Montero walked away with despair in his heart and fury in his mind. For the love of God, he muttered under his breath. Just leave me be. He stopped far away, ready to strangle his cousin the moment he came near. He almost turned back, but the thought of causing a scandal held him back. His whole body shook with anger. He leaned against a wall, prepared to wait until midnight, or even until the next day if needed. But it wouldn't come to that. Adriano, after about half an hour, said goodbye to Carlota and walked in the same direction as his cousin. Anacleto hesitated between confronting him or walking away. In the end, he chose to stay and face him. Adriano approached slowly, looked straight at Anacleto, and kept walking. Anacleto stood frozen, pressed against the wall. After 5 minutes, he finally caught his breath. He had not felt a drop of blood in his veins. During that moment, Tan walked home slowly, cautiously, as if afraid of his own shadow. Of course, this incident could not last long. Anacleto had seen with his own eyes that Carlota was not loyal to him, and now he had nothing more to hope for. That's how it stayed for a few hours. As soon as he got home, Anacleto sat down with a pen and wrote a long, emotional letter to his girlfriend, pouring out all the pain in his heart. Carlota replied with a note explaining that the person she had spoken to from the window was just a visitor at her house. He didn't believe her, and wrote again. She answered once more, repeating what she had said before. 3 days later, in the middle of the afternoon, and in the middle of the street, something happened that brought great joy to the neighbors. That afternoon, the two cousins met near Carlota's house. Anacleto happened to cough a small, innocent cough, but Adriano took it as mockery. He stopped walking and shouted an insult at Anacleto. Anacleto, by misfortune, responded with an insult of his own. Adriano's face turned red with rage. He stepped forward and grabbed Anacleto by the jacket. In a moment like that, even the most timid man would feel forced to fight. To make things worse, Carlota appeared at the window just then. There was no way to stop what came next. Dear reader, I ask for your forgiveness for showing you this scene of violence, but if you look closely, you'll see that it has a kind of romancelo, perhaps, but still romance. In the Middle Ages, things didn't happen any differently. The difference was that knights fought with other weapons, with more ceremony, and the lady of the castle was nothing like a common flirt. But only the setting changed. The heart of the matter remained the same. The Lady of Gamboa watched the fight between the two suitors with a mix of pity, flattery, and guilt. She saw Anacleteto's white hat fly into the air, his hair come loose, his tie fall out of place. Adriano, for his part, took a few stray kicks from his rival, and he paid back everyone with hard punches. Both rolled on the ground, surrounded by a growing crowd that either couldn't or didn't dare to pull them apart. One shouted, the other breathed heavily, the onlookers laughed, and dust covered them all like a mysterious cloud. After 10 minutes, some brave bystanders finally managed to separate the two enemies. Both had blood on them. Anacleto had lost a tooth. Adriano had a bite mark on his face. Bruised, dusty, and beaten, they picked up their hats and almost started fighting again. Two kind strangers stopped them from repeating the fight and took them home. Carlota couldn't bear to watch anymore. She went inside, blaming herself. From there, she prayed to a statue of Our Lady, asking for peace between the two men and promising never to give attention to either again, so they wouldn't hate each other more. At the same time, she prayed for forgiveness. Both men silently swore to kill each other. That scene at Gamboa Beach became the talk of the neighborhood for days. The reason for the fight quickly got out, and as always happens, people added many made-up details to the real story. The truth was that Carlota's beautiful eyes had turned the two cousins into bitter enemies. Could there be better proof of a woman's charm? Bento Fagundes heard about the fight, and the reason behind it. Bentino was heartbroken. He tried to make peace between the two young men, speaking to them with both authority and kindness. But nothing worked. Neither firm words nor gentle pleas could change their minds. Each one secretly wished the other dead, and the only thing holding them back was the fear of getting caught. "Uncle Bento," said Anacleto Montero, "I cannot live decently while that wicked heart still beats." "Forgive him," Bento replied. "There's no forgiveness for such a monster." Bentinho Fagundes was deeply troubled. He went from one man to the other, trying to reason with them, but had no luck with either. His face grew pale, his spirit darkened, and something truly alarming happened. He stopped playing backgammon. While neither of the two rivals dared to carry out their violent plans, they both turned to another strategion, less dramatic but just as cruel: lies. Anacleto wrote to Carlota, telling her that if Adriano married her, he would bring with him 4 children from a past relationship. Adriano in turn told his girlfriend that Anacleto was one of the biggest drunks in the city. Carlota received both letters on the same day. At first she didn't know what to believe. She leaned toward doubt, but neither man gained anything from her hesitation. By refusing to believe in the children of one or the drinking of the other, she only came to believe that both had very low morals. "I think they're both scoundrels," she said to herself. That was the final word on her 2 suitors. Even though both cousins kept walking the sands of Gamboa Beach just to catch a glimpse of her and fight for her love, their efforts were wasted. Carlota had decided not to show herself. This only made the 2 rivals even angrier with each other, and they almost came to blows again. But then a 3rd suitor appeared. In just a few days, he won Carlota's hand in marriage. The wedding took place 3 weeks after the fistfight between the 2 cousins. The news was like throwing more fuel onto a fire already burning with hatred between them. Neither of them blamed Carlota or fate, they blamed each other. The death of Dona Leonarda brought a brief pause to the family quarrels inside Bento Fagundes' home, which had made his final days deeply bitter. But this was only a truce, nothing more. Deep sorrow, walking hand in hand with an inflamed internal organ, put the poor apothecary to bed 1 month after Carlota's wedding, and into the grave 50 days later. His illness brought another pause in the conflict, and this time it seemed more sincere because the matter had grown far more serious. Lying weak in bed, Bento Fagundes watched both nephews care for him with unusual gentleness and obedience. Yet, even then, he could see a deep, unbridgeable gap between them. That pain, more than any other, cut into his heart the most. "I want to see you 2 reconciled," he told Anacleto Montero one day. "But I have no hope that I will. I'm going to die," he said, his voice low. "And I'll carry this grief with me." "Uncle Bento, stop thinking such dark thoughts," Anacleto replied. "Dark they are. Yes, very dark," Bento said firmly. "Nonsense. You'll come with me to spend a few days in Tijuca," Anacleto insisted. "With you and Adriano," Bento said, watching his nephew closely. At that, Anacleto's face hardened. Hatred, only hatred, flashed in his eyes like a glimpse of hell. Bento sighed. "To Adriano," he said, "do you know, my dear Adriano, what pain I carry with me to the grave?" "Grave," Adriano cut in. "Let's talk about something more cheerful." "I feel death coming," Bento replied. "And the deepest pain I carry is knowing you and Anacleto." Please, Uncle Bento, Adriano interrupted. Don't get upset. It could make you worse. But it was useless. 3 days before he died, Bento Fagund saw both nephews in his room together. He called them close and begged them to make peace. At first they avoided the subject. Then they refused outright. Still, the apothecary refused to give up. He reached for each of their hands and pressed them together. It was a hollow gesture. Both men trembled, and their faces turned pale with rage. Among them there was such fear that not one dared to eat at Bento Fagundes' house, afraid the cook, if bribed, might slip them a dose of arsenic. They didn't speak to each other, of course. They didn't even look at each other. They trembled when they found themselves alone and avoided each other, trying to prevent another fight from breaking out just steps away from the sick man. The illness was deadly. Bento Fagundes died between the two relatives. They wrapped his body in silence, sent out the invitations, arranged the funeral without exchanging a single word. If Donna Leonarda, their mother, had still been alive, she would have seen that she hadn't been wrong when she suspected the old pharmacist had hidden some money away. The will was the public confession of that. In it, Bento Fagundes declared he owned, in his business, slaves, properties, and who knows what bonds, about 38 contos. His universal heirs were Anacoleto and Adriano, his last living relatives. However, there was a clause in the will, written 1 month before his death, that caused quite a stir in the neighborhood. Bento Fagundes wrote, "The said heirs whom I hereby name shall be required to enjoy my estate together, either by continuing my pharmacy business or setting up another one, without dividing the inheritance. The inheritance shall only be divided among their children, if any, in case they refuse to follow this, my final wish." The clause was unusual, but everyone understood it was the deceased's last attempt to bring his nephews back together. "Wasted effort," said Anacoleto's barber. "They act like cats and dogs." This opinion, from the barber, was the most common one. Indeed, as soon as they heard that clause read aloud, both heirs made a face, as if rejecting the idea of reconciliation. Their pride would not allow them to give in to what they saw as the betrayal of their noble hatred. "Let me see," Adriano thought to himself, "if I'd ever allow a scoundrel like him to." Anacoleto kept muttering to himself, "A scoundrel like him reconciled with me. That's all we needed, even if he ends up begging on the streets." 2 days after the will was read, both men went to Bento Fagundes' house to organize his belongings. Thinking of him filled them with a kind of exemplary devotion. The funeral mass on the 7th day was well attended. Both received condolences from everyone, but they didn't offer any to each other, nor did they exchange a single word of comfort. "What hearts of stone," said an angry lady. But as they left the church, the two men accidentally bumped into each other. "Pardon me," Adriano said. "No problem at all," Anacoleto replied. The next day, Anacoleto wrote to his cousin, "Don't you think it would be a good idea to commission a tombstone for our dearly missed uncle?" Adriano answered, "I fully support your idea. He deserves it, and much more." Together they visited the stonecutter shop. They talked to him, discussed the price, and agreed on the wording for the epitaph. It honored not only the deceased, but also, clearly, the two living men. They left the shop together, and along the way they spoke of every moment of their late uncle's life, with deep and sincere emotion. Both remembered how much he had loved them. That day, they even shared a meal somber, yet warm. 2 months later, they began talking about the need to honor the late man's final wish, which, according to Anacleto, should be treated as sacred. Most sacred, Adriano corrected him. 5 months after the death of the pharmacist, Carlota and her husband walked into a fabric store, looking to buy some yards of cotton cloth. They didn't notice the business name painted on the door. And even if they had noticed, how could they possibly know who Fagundes Montero were? There they were, the two partners, standing in the shop, ready to serve the customer. Carlota turned pale, but she quickly regained control. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked for what she needed, and the two men rushed to help her. Whether they were moved or not is hard to say, but they were certainly polite. "Don't you think, madam, that there is better fabric than this one?" Fagundes held up a piece of fabric and waited for Montero's reaction. "Could be," Montero said, crossing his arms. "How much?" "Very cheap," Fagundes replied. 2,000 rei. "That's expensive." Fagundes smirked. "We can bring it down to 1,800. Montero thought for a moment. Then he said, 1,600. Fagundes made a face, like the idea hurt. Montero did the same. They both pretended to think it over, but not for long. "All right," they both agreed. The fabric was measured and paid for. Carlota, who had stayed quiet the whole time, gave a small nod and walked out with her husband. The cousin stood in silence for a few seconds. Fagundes folded the fabric while Montero put the money into a wooden box. Inside, they were both smiling. They had just made 600 rei on every yard.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.